Previously on Starseed Psyche, Kyo Adachi and the majority of the Japanese Suberaith Soldiers have begun what they hope is the final battle with the Kyuserax and the Commission, who secretly created and control them. There are 4 final bomber ships with Kyuserax forces floating outside Earth's atmosphere, and Kyo began the attack with only a handful of his allies at first, crashing into one of the ships and fighting the forces inside. Kyo managed to kill one of the Commission members, Chinese military president Moon Chu, but after doing so, while still fighting American Secretary of Defense Knox the Bomber Briggs, the Japanese military chief of staff, Buru, started using the other ships to bomb the one Kyo and his allies were on. Kyo ended up getting sucked out into space, but was thankfully rescued by his girlfriend, Toshiko Yamada. She had helped show her mother, General Ritsu, that Buru, who'd long been her superior, was the real enemy. Many soldiers got to see evidence of this firsthand, and agreed to accept help from the alien race, the Kyusidians, who'd been blamed for the attacks, to get shuttled up in their ships to join the final battle. Kyo is now on a Kyusidian ship with many of his Suberaith allies, headed back into the fight. Let's see how he and his allies fare in the next chapter of Starseed Psyche. I didn't know which of the 3 other ships Buru was on, but I was torn between wanting to get to him immediately and wanting him to have to watch as we tore through all the other ships before finally facing him. I figured finding him fast was probably the best option though. If we could take out all the other Kyuserax crown users, like him, leaving only the one Faye was wearing, we could likely finally use it to shut down the Kyuserax for good. Before moving into another fight, we stayed cloaked and flew over to the ship that was getting decimated by the others. Faye and Chip were clinging to the edge of a hole, keeping themselves from being sucked out into space like I'd been. We were able to beam them onto our ship. Once we did, it became clear that, in the rush to get everyone here, some things had slipped Toshiko's mind to tell the other soldiers. Roku thrust up his foot and aimed his blade. "What the hell is that thing?" "Hey, we're being nice to Kyusidians now, and her name is Faye Esriel, and she's an absolute..." Oh, you probably meant me since I'm a lizard and all, right?" He lowered his leg. "A collie?" "Yes, sirree. I'm what's called a Repsaro. Got a few of us helping out in this fight. This is all pretty new to me too still, but, I'm just learning to roll with it now." Roku slowly turned his head towards me. "Lizard people. Seriously? Do I need to look out the window and make sure the Earth is still round?" The other soldiers let Chip's strange new form sink in while the Kyusidians piloting the ship flew around the vessel being bombarded and beamed on our other allies. Luckily, Faye's crashed vessel inside had emergency spacesuits, so Corleone and Crispin had put those on to keep them from suffocating as the ship's breathable atmosphere dwindled away to nothing. While we were getting the others, Knox Briggs, in his half-destroyed Kyuserax mech, managed to use rocket boosters on the machine's feet to propel himself out into space and fly over to another of the bombers. He got around the back of one and must have used the Kyuserax crown to open a hangar door, though with a barrier maintaining the inner atmosphere of the ship. He got inside just as fire was ceasing on the ship we'd evacuated. It was little more than floating rubble now. All the Kyuserax that had been inside were flailing in the air and floating off into space. We flew around after Briggs, and before the hangar door slid shut, the Kyusidians flew our ship right inside. Our ship was still cloaked, but as we crashed into and knocked over a wave of Kyuserax, it became pretty clear to all inside that they had company. Fire started coming at us immediately, but this ship had better defenses than Faye's had. Hekima marched to the back of our ship. "This is where we end this, soldiers. Fight hard and watch each other's backs. The Kyuserax and Buru have taken their last human life. Let's give them what they've got coming." He leapt out of the ship and the few dozen soldiers charged out after him. I stepped up alongside Toshiko. "Well, shall we dance?" She grabbed the back of my head, pulled me in, and kissed me, then said, "We shall." We sprang out of the ship together and began leaping and spinning around the oncoming fire. This fight was already looking a lot better than the last. Suberaith soldiers were tearing through the Kyuserax, despite there being even more of them in this ship. A brisker darted through the crowd and came right towards us. I grabbed Toshiko's hand and spun her towards it. She twirled on her toe, making her 3 blade fragments swirl around her. The brisker tried to leap around the blades, but only managed to get over one, as the other 2 slashed across its leg and neck, making it spin out through the air past her. As it got to me, I kicked straight up into a perfect vertical split. The brisker flew up, and both Toshiko and I hurled our blades up after it. We carved it to pieces and didn't even bother to watch them fall as we marched further into the fray. I noticed some of the fire on us was coming from above. That was when I spotted flying Kyuserax shooting from the air. It had been a while since I'd seen any of them, Kyuserax fleeters as we started calling them. I was about to head up for one when a familiar Suberaith blade stabbed into one, strangely having a sort of glowing rope attached to it. Quinn suddenly used the rope to yank herself right up to the stabbed fleeter, sliced it in half, then leapt off it and hurled her blade to another flying Kyuserax, pulling herself towards it. She bounded and pulled herself from one to the next, carving them all apart. I looked over at Toshiko, but before I even had to ask, she said, "Quinn asked for a last-minute upgrade to her suit. It was an interesting idea, so I did my best to oblige." I laughed excitedly. "That's awesome! Did you put it in everyone's suit?" Toshiko's blades flew back and settled onto her arm. "No, sorry, I only had time to add it to 2 of them." She hurled her blade fragments forward, and this time all 3 were connected to her by glowing strands. They stabbed into a Kyuserax butcher's chest. She yanked back, reeling her blades in, and hurling the butcher past her towards me. I used my telekinesis to grab it, hurl it over me, and slam it face first into the ground, before guiding both my Suberaith blades straight down into its spine. Before I could make another move, Chip darted over, grabbed the butcher's blade in his tail, swung it over his head, and slammed it right through the Kyuserax's neck. Faye skipped over next to him, holding up her massive blades to block all the fire coming at Chip. He looked from me to Faye. "I think I spotted that American commission feller's mech at the back of the ship. He might have gotten out of it, but either way, I'd like to have a go at him. Can you 2 telekinetic folks give me a little boost through this crowd?" I wasn't sure, but Faye gave me an assured nod. We both stood on either side of Chip, and I felt my telekinesis wrap around him. Counting us down to go. "Ready, Faye?" She giddily said, "Very much so." 3, 2, 1, go. We both stepped forward and launched. Chip shot through the air like a scaly rocket. A fleeter tried getting into his way, but he held his shield-like blades forward and just tackled right through it. It looked like he was going to get all the way to the other end of the ship, when a concentrated beam of blue light burst towards him. His shield protected him, but he was knocked way off course and crashed into the side of the ship, falling into the battle out of sight. That was when I finally got my first look at Buru's Dragerex. He flew up over the battle, and from the lean dragon mech's mouth spat another beam of energy, carving it across the battlefield to where Chip had likely just crashed down. I was just about to charge towards Chip when Toshiko got between me and Faye, with fury in her eyes. "Okay, my turn." This really doesn't seem like a good time to be interrupting the story, so Chip, let's just tell people about the new Fantasy Beasts coloring book really quick and get back to it. Can do, friendo, except we're also supposed to tell folks about the fact that the PopCross Studios poster store is up and back in business again. It's even finally got some Starseed Psyche posters up there, along with hundreds of other posters from past videos on the channel. Whoa, seriously, it's back? And wow, it's nice to finally get some Starseed Psyche merch up there. So I guess that's linked in the description again too, along with the Amazon bookstore, where you can find novels and coloring books. Right you are, Kyo, old buddy. So if any of that sounds good to y'all, you can check it out, but for now, let's get right back into this battle. Faye and I nodded, counted down again, and launched Toshiko right towards Buru. He saw her coming and fired a beam towards her. She shot her blades towards the ceiling above, still bound to them by ropes, and pulled herself up out of the shot's path. She kicked off the roof as a dozen rockets soared out from the Dragerex's back and spiraled through the air towards her. She latched her blades to an opposing wall and pulled herself out of the way of 3 of them, shot a blade to the ceiling again and yanked herself away from more, and kept that going until she was close enough to take a swipe at the Dragerex's chest. Unfortunately, just as she was about to, another beam shot at her from the side and sent her spiraling through the air. The blast had come from a mostly familiar mech.
"Buru, if you don't die here today, I'm gonna gut you myself for pulling that stunt with the ships,"
Knox Briggs said, marching into the fight again. On the side of his mech, where I'd carved off his rocket launchers and weapons, he had a new attachment, this one actually being a large arm with a beam cannon in its palm. Toshiko had used her blades to stop spinning out and was springing in towards them again, but I couldn't just watch from a distance anymore. I looked at Faye. "You got us covered?" She nodded. "I'll do my best." She ran along behind me, holding her blades up in front of us and around us both as we ran through the battle. I carved through drones in our path as I ran and used my telekinesis to shove some of the smaller ones out of our way. A rocket zipped at us through the crowd out of nowhere, but Faye used her own telekinesis to guide it away from my head and exploded into the side of another butcher. We were getting through fairly easily, but then I spotted Sake Anya just as a brisker tackled him, stabbing its blade right into the chest of his suit. It clearly didn't get far enough in to puncture his skin, but it was close. It landed on him on the ground, raised its arm, and was about to pierce right into the same hole again. A look of terror struck his face. I thrust my hand towards him to try and hurl the brisker away with my telekinesis, but I didn't need to. With a furious battle cry, Captain Hekima tackled the brisker off Andia. "I'm not losing anyone else to you metal freaks!" He hammered his fist into its head 3 times before piercing his Suberaith blade right through its metal skull, pinning it into the ground. He stayed on it ready to strike again, until he saw its body starting to deteriorate. He turned back to Sake Andia, stepped over, and held out a hand to help him up. Andia took it, saying, "Thanks, Captain. You're a real lifesaver." I thought to myself, he's right, Hekima. You might not have always been, but you are now. I hope you know it. Faye and I kept moving. A whole cluster of drones got into our path and were about to cause problems for us, when sniper bolts zipped in from behind us and started picking them off one at a time. I looked back to nod appreciatively at Shatsia, who was perched on top of the Kyuserian ship with her weapon. She hadn't gotten all of the ones ahead of us, but Tarbis charged in out of nowhere and snatched up 3 of them at once, tackling them all out of our path. I thanked him and moved farther on through the fight. Finally, I could see Toshiko clearly, still flinging herself through the air around Buru's dragon, and saw that Chip was taking on Briggs. I wanted to help both of them out, but before we could reach them, a Kyuserax stomped into our path, with energy building up in its Tyrannosaurus-like mouth. Faye guided her blades right in front of me, but I wasn't sure they could actually block a blast from this thing. Thankfully, the shot didn't come, as Roku flew in out of nowhere, kicking the Kyuserax in the side of the head hard enough to make it turn away from us. He then kicked back off it, but spun through the air and hurled his blade off his leg into the side of its neck. It just barely stuck in, but that was enough for him to kick it down, and make it yank the creature's head towards the ground. Akuma Calico then skidded right up towards its mouth and sent her 4 little blade fragments right down its throat. She twirled her finger around in the air with a sadistic grin, clearly guiding her blades to swirl around like a blender, tearing it up from the inside. Still, the energy built up quickly in its mouth again. Roku leapt over to it and kicked it in the head once more, trying to force its aim at some of its own drones, but it was ready for it this time and barely moved. He bounded off it, but it instantly turned towards him, clearly about to fire. I stepped closer to it, latched onto the top of its mouth with my own telekinesis, and yanked down as hard as I could. Its mouth shut just as it was firing, and the front of its face exploded, pelting me with debris. Roku looked at me in shock and confusion. "I don't know what that was you just did, but you better not be expecting a thank you." I chuckled and rolled my eyes. "Definitely not, but you're welcome anyway." Faye and I both leapt onto and ran over the Kyuserax's body, finally having reached the other end of the ship. I wanted to go after Buru, but Toshiko seemed to be faring fine. Meanwhile, it seemed like Knox had Chip on his heels. A wave of rockets exploded against Chip's shield, but just because he blocked them didn't make the impact disappear. He was hurled back across the ground, with the burly mech charging after him with its fist raised. Chip managed to get to his feet just as the fist was swinging at him. He leapt over it and scrambled up the mech's arm. He swung his blade at the glass protecting Knox. His blade pierced through it, but didn't quite get to the target. Knox's mech then grabbed Chip by the tail and ripped him off, smashing him to the ground and aiming more rockets at him. Thankfully, just as he was firing right into Chip's face, I slid right next to him and thrust my arms up. The rockets came, but I guided them away from us. "Incoming, Toshiko!" I yelled as the rockets flew up towards Buru. She easily got out of the way, but unfortunately Buru managed to weave around most of them too. Only one hit him, and it didn't do much damage. At least Chip was safe. I slashed my blades at one of Knox's legs and made his mech stumble enough to free Chip, while Knox steadied himself. We both sprang backwards and Chip gave me an appreciative nod. "Thanks, friendo." "Of course, man. Now you ready to do this together?" He nodded. "And not at all, ain't even on our radar this time." Chip leapt right for Knox again, and I used my telekinesis to thrust him faster forward. Knox swung his arm up to get into Chip's way, but Faye used her telekinesis to shove the arm back. Chip tackled the mech, and I yanked my blades the opposite way under its legs. The machine toppled and slammed right onto its back. "Let's plug it up, Faye," I called. She and I both guided our blades right over the rocket holes, pressing them face down so nothing could come out. Knox whipped his arm around again with light building up in its palm. It aimed towards Chip as he was trying to carve through the glass to get to Knox. Chip looked like he hadn't noticed the arm raising towards him.
I ain't one to sling insults on the regular, but you're an embarrassment to America for being part of this commission, bucko. My memories from my life there may be fake, but I'm still gonna represent them a heck of a lot better than you.
Just before the mech's hand fired, Chip lashed his tail around its wrist and pulled it slightly farther down, changing its aim. He pulled himself out of the way at the same time as the beam that exploded forth fired right into Knox, shattering the glass and vaporizing the man inside. Chip landed down near us as the tanky mech started to deteriorate. Chip and I high-fived. I was then about ready to leap back into the fight as a Kyuserax drone marched up next to us, but then stopped. It suddenly waved at us. I then noticed it was mimicking what Faye was doing, as she held one hand to the Kyuserax crown on her head. Chip, Kaio, I'm starting to gain some control over the remaining creations, though I can feel that there is still another holding the majority of the control. None of us needed to guess who that was. Someone had clearly figured out how to keep the hangar door open because another Kyusidian ship was flying into the hangar with more Suberaith soldiers on board. Buru quickly noticed. He aimed the mouth of his Dragerex at it, but Toshiko hurled all 3 of her blade fragments at him as she leapt towards him from the ceiling. She wrapped her ropes around the mech's mouth, clamping it shut and yanking down as she fell towards us on the floor. Its head jerked down, but it managed to hold itself in the air and swing to the side, making Toshiko swing along with it. She got close to its tail, which thrust up at her, with a butcher-like blade at its end. She made her ropes holding her blades vanish so she could fall out of the tail's path. As she was landing, Buru targeted her and fired a beam right for her. I reached out my hand and pulled, telekinetically yanking her out of the way towards us. She ran with the momentum of my pull, calling her blades back to her arm and coming over to group up with Faye, Chip, and me, as we stared up confidently at our final foe. I could hear rage in his breathing. His voice boomed through his mech as he said,
"There is little more repulsive to me than witnessing my own soldiers, human soldiers, swayed to become Kyusi-hugging filth. I only take solace in the knowledge that we've already achieved everything we hoped to. We've already won. Humanity can now spread throughout the stars with our own technology, not doing so under the thumb of an enemy empire that think they have any claim over us."
Faye stepped forward. We never intended to have you under our thumb, not in hundreds of thousands of years anyhow. We truly did only wish to help—
Muzzle your malignant oppressor so you can face the grave with what little dignity of yours remains, privates and so-called captain. Not that being slain as a traitor to your kind leaves much room for dignity. I stared up at him proudly and said, "We're not the traitors here, and I bet somewhere in you know that. The whole world certainly will soon. You noticed yet that most of the soldiers here still have those cameras on their suits that you made us wear in the caves? This whole battle is getting streamed right back to soldiers at the base who are going to share it worldwide. How many angles do you think we've already gotten of you and that American commission member fighting on the side of the enemy?" He glanced around at the soldiers, but tried to hide the new surge of rage that came with the revelation. "Temporary vitriol may fly my way in the present, but the future will come to see us as the heroes who set humanity on a path free of risk of subjugation at the hands of an alien race that thought they could remain technologically superior to us. And you QC-hugging swine will eventually be remembered as the misguided whelps who tried to force humanity to bend the knee to the order of an alien iron fist, masked as a helping hand." His hate, his fear, his rage, it all felt very familiar. I think there are a lot of people like you in the world, Buru. People like who I used to be, who let their anger convince them that the only way to live safely in this world is as a defensive, cruel, and sometimes downright evil person. Hearing you justify your own crimes is just making me glad I was nudged onto a better path. I wish someone had done the same for you. Save your infantile attempt at psychoanalysis for your falsely favorable alien autocrats, Private Adachi. Not that you'll be leaving here to convene with them and mourn humanity's triumph.
I realized there was nothing I could say to convince Buru we were the ones truly helping humanity.
which was fine with me because it meant there was no good reason not to tear him apart.
He fired a beam right down towards us while simultaneously shooting a swarm of 12 rockets, which all seemed to seek after us. We all leapt in separate directions. 3 of the rockets came at me, but I glanced to the side and spotted a butcher dueling with Tonitoshima. I guided all the rockets away from me, forcing them to explode into the back of the butcher, giving my squad mate an upper hand in his fight. Toshiko managed to slash her blade fragments through the rockets before they got close to her, while Chip and Faye used their blades as shields to block the blasts. The Dragerex shifted the aim of its beam towards where I landed. I saw my allies ready to help out in my peripheral, so I thrust my blades up in front of me as a shield. I pushed back with them and my telekinesis. Just before the blast reached me, Faye and Chip's blade soared right in front of mine, stacking the shield up even more. The beam struck with more force than I expected, and my heart started to ache. Like it was linked to my telekinesis, which I was clearly pushing too hard. Still, with that, my blades, and those of my allies, we managed to hold off the blast. With Buru furiously trying to shoot through our defense, Toshiko took an opportunity to latch her blade onto his chest and use her reconnected ropes to pull herself right up to him and start pounding at the chest casing holding him in. He thrust his mech's hand towards her, but she sprang to the side, tightened her rope, then swung all the way around him, tying his mech's arms down to his side before landing on his chest again and continuing to pound the glass, cracking it a little bit more with every strike. Still shooting at me, he swung his tail blade up towards her. She didn't want to let up, so she kept pounding and pounding. A little too long. She miscalculated the tail blade speed and it would have hit her. If a Tekigami claw hadn't shot up from below, grabbed the tail, and pulled it off course. The blade ended up swiping up past Toshiko and slashing the mech's own jaw, finally forcing it to cease its fire on me. I dropped to my knees, taking in some deep breaths, but still watching as General Ritsu, in the suit Toshiko had made her, kicked off the tail, landing on the Dragerex's neck. She thrust her claw right into its throat while firing bolts into it and grabbing some tech at the back of its gullet. She ripped the claw out, tearing some tech out along with her. Its throat sparked and glitched as she leapt down next to her daughter on the mech's chest and swung back her claw. Fitting that this weapon you forced me to get will be your undoing, former chief of staff. She swiped the claw forward and it crashed through the glass. Buru ducked his head aside but was still clawed across the cheek, sending blood spurting through the Dragerex's innards. He made the mech swoop down, about to slam its stomach into the ground. Both Yamadas leapt off to one side, and Toshiko retracted her blades and rope. The dragon was about to soar up again, so Faye and I each latched onto one of its wings with our telekinesis and did our best to hold it down. Faye was holding her side down much more effectively than I was, but either way, Buru was still going to be airborne again soon. Toshiko was clearly about to latch her ropes onto it to hold it down further, when another round of rockets shot up out of it. She sent her blades to slash through those, while Ritsu shot some of them out of the sky with her claw's blaster. At the same time, a dozen Kyuserax drones and briskers turned from the battle with the other soldiers and started aiming and running at Faye. She aimed her blades to the side to block the oncoming fire, and Chip tackled the closest drone to her, grabbing it and hurling it at a brisker running around behind her to make it topple over and crash. Unfortunately, Faye's split focus let the Dragerex fully leap back into the air. Buru got as high above the battle as he could without crashing into the ceiling. Thankfully, there was still a hole smashed open in his mech's cockpit. It was even big enough for the end of one of my blades to get into it. A well-aimed swipe with him distracted could finish him off. But before trying to make that move, I paused. I loved the idea of getting to be the one to take out the big bad boss, but there was someone who he'd been a big bad boss to for a lot longer than me. It was instantly obvious to me that I wasn't the one that this finishing blow would be the most cathartic for. Buru was trying to get his mech to shoot at Faye, but its beam breath had clearly been disabled by Ritsu's attack on its throat. While he was figuring that out, I leapt over to Toshiko and Ritsu. "General, with your permission, we're gonna give you your opening." Ritsu looked at me, then at her daughter. Toshiko tossed me one of her blade fragments, bound to her with a rope. Ritsu looked back at me. "Approved. I await your mark." Toshiko knelt down and sprang up as fast as she could, with me pushing her even faster with my telekinesis. Buru saw her rocketing up and swiped his tail around towards her. She would have flown right into it, but she tightened her rope, simultaneously pulling herself down while flinging me straight up. I shot up past the tail right as it swiped over Toshiko. I grabbed onto the base of the dragon's tail, then yanked Toshiko back up the rest of the way to it. She got closer and I used my telekinesis to give her a spin. She twirled in a beautiful tour en l'air while swinging out her other 2 blade fragments and ropes. She bound the Dragerex's legs with one rope and wrapped its arms with the other. She pulled herself in towards its stomach, but it flapped its wings inwards to try shielding Buru. I clambered up its spine, grabbed its wings, and yanked back with my physical and telekinetic strength. I held it off enough for Toshiko to still land and cling to its bound legs, but the end of its wings were still curling around to block any shot on Buru. I was losing my grip with my heart aching even more, until the burden eased. Another telekinetic force was pushing back the wings from the ground. I looked down to see Faye aiming one hand up, and to see Chip soaring up towards me. "Together or not at all, yeehaw!" He tackled into the dragon's head as it was about to swing down towards Toshiko. His momentum yanked the head back as I gave one more fierce tug on the wings with Faye's help. They moved out of the way. The shot was open, but nobody was on its tail. Buru clearly saw Ritsu taking aim on him and swung the blade of the tail right up into the path of her shot. It seemed like she could have fired in time, but she didn't. The tail got in her way, just as Ritsu sprang into the air. Understandably, she wanted this final blow to be a little more up close and personal. She wouldn't have been able to jump high enough if the tail hadn't come down into her path, but she reached it, grabbed the tail with her claw, and used it to fling herself up and land once more on the Dragerex's exposed chest. She punched her fist through the hole she'd already made and pressed her claw's blaster right against Buru's skull. "Thank you, Buru, for helping me appreciate the value of my daughter's insubordination." The blast rang out. The red blip of light ignited Buru's cockpit, and the Dragerex's wings suddenly became much easier to pull back. The machine started to lower, then free fell to the ground. We all leapt off it as it crashed to the floor, just before we all landed around it. The machine quickly started to deteriorate. I'd seen Kyuserax wither before, but this time was the most mesmerizing. I actually got to pause and watch as the metal shrunk away into odd geometric patterns before vanishing to dust. Soon, all that was left was the lifeless corpse of the former chief of staff. Faye stepped closer to the rest of the battle underway and pressed her hands to the last Kyuserax crown on her head, taking a slow, deep, confident breath in. As she did, as if in a wave, all the Kyuserax stopped fighting back. They just stood, frozen for a moment, as the dozens of soldiers in the hangar realized what was happening. The drones then all sat or lay down on the ground, making it easier to see all the still combat-ready soldiers waiting for another shoe to drop. But none did. General Ritsu yelled across the ship, "Soldiers, the battle is won! Congratulations and thank you to every single one of you for saving the world." The ship exploded into cheers. The wave of excitement rushed up to me and helped it hit me that the general was right. We really had done it. The war was over. There have been plenty of times in Starseed Psyche where I finish writing an episode and I go, I don't know what I'm going to draw for this episode. But this was a rare case where I finished writing the episode and I thought, oh my gosh, there are so many things, so many moments in this episode that I want to draw, I don't know what to pick. I might need to end up adding some more drawings to this chapter for the book release. Anyway, there will be one more episode to wrap up this series, but for now, besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote I read a couple weeks back that I really liked, which said, "Action is the cure to anxiety. No amount of overthinking will get you out of the hole that you're stuck in. If you want to start making change, start moving forward, start acting on whatever it is you feel you need to start acting on. Even if you don't know what you're doing, taking some action will help you learn what it is that you need to do." I hope that's motivating. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.